Welcome to Hope Does Not Disappoint, a podcast brought to you by the Office of Youth Ministry of the Diocese of Tucson. We invite you to join us as young people engage in meaningful conversations with Bishop Weisenburger, exploring questions about life, faith, and the journey of hope in the context of 2025 Jubilee of Hope.
My name's Fiorella.
My name is Tabitha.
And we're here with Bishop Weisenburger. Our topic for today is family and vocation. And as many young people dream and start. Oh my gosh! Many young people dream of starting a family and blossoming in that vocation. However, they often face difficult family dynamics, with the separation of parents being a very common challenge in this society. We understand that parents don't intend to break their commitments, and that they too struggle to find support and viable solutions to stay together. While it's tough for everyone involved, it can particularly be very painful for a child or a teen to see their family be broken apart. So how can we advise young people to heal their wounds and maintain hope for their own future families?
Wow, another deep question. You all don't ask easy questions, do you? I grew up in a family, so I know a little bit about that. I've never been married, which I guess makes me an expert in marriage. But ironically, almost from a sad direction, I would tell you, I was asked early in my priesthood to go back to school for 2 years and become a canon lawyer. And what canonists spend most of their time with is helping people through the annulment process. A very, very tiny number of Catholics who divorce ever even approach the tribunal anymore to get that declaration of nullity if it applies. But I did that full-time for 4 years. And so I sat day in and day out with people in my office, 40 hours a week. I also did evenings and weekends sometimes. And I sat with people and I listened to their stories. And tears would flow. And how a relationship began, how it progressed, and how it ended. And I think there's a number of things that are good for us to remember when it comes to marriage and family life. The first is, this will probably sound weird, odd to you all, but if you could go back in time 60, 70 years, when I was a small child, it was a different existence. Most mothers were at home, and I am not saying women should stay at home. That's not my point at all. I'm just saying there was a parent at home during the day for many of us at that time. And then dads, for the most part, had a job that did not involve hopping from company to company, resulting in move after move. And most people lived near to at least extended family. So you had aunts, uncles, cousins. And most people went to church, so they had all these church relationships. And secularism had not set in so strong. So what we've done is we now have an environment, a culture, and an economy where it's felt that both parents have to work full-time. People are not going to church and establishing those family relationships there. Careers are very transitory. People move from place to place. So it even breaks up those relationships. We're not real close to our cousins, our aunts, our uncles, our extended family anymore. So we have all that going on. And then we wonder when a marriage is in trouble. All those structures that in the past helped to support it are gone. But the other thing that's really critical when it comes to sacramental marriages, people sometimes fight us on marriage preparation. Sort of like when someone's drowning out in the ocean and you try to save them and they fight with you in the water. But that marriage preparation is so critical. And it's seldom done by priests. It's usually done by married people, oftentimes deacons and their wives, but other couples as well, people who have been there and experienced and know it. But if you're given some of those tools through marriage preparation, you have a far greater chance of success. So that kind of sets a groundwork on marriage and family life. Is our economy has changed, our culture has changed, and it's destabilized those relationships. So what the church does is we do our very best to try to counter that, to respond to that. And when marriages do come apart and families are torn apart, we try to reach out as however we can, as to the extent that people are connected to our Catholic schools and our Catholic churches. It's kind of the best that we can do in that respect. But again, probably the most critical thing people could do to keep their marriage and family intact is by practicing faith, because that's what creates that first level of relationships. It's also the message of hope and the example of sacrificial love that will help keep marriages from getting in trouble in the first place.
I love how you connect family into faith and how family really needs to hold on and onto faith. So, what can the church say to young people to inspire confidence apart from all these struggles and all these separations, in their dreams of creating a family and getting married?
Pope Francis actually speaks of what we call a demographic, what's the term he uses? Blight, or a demographic desert. And he says there's whole cultures, mostly in the Western world, there's whole cultures where people don't want to have kids anymore. They've lost hope. And I think one of the best things that we in the church do is, if you preach the gospel well, it is a message of hope. There was a comedian one time on Sirius Radio, and she said, and I don't recommend her per se, and I'm not going to use her name, but anyway, I have Sirius Radio on the car. And she was laughing, and she was saying, people today say, I don't want to bring children into a world like this. And she goes, do you think when settlers were crossing America in wagons, wondering if they'd survive, that was a great time to bring kids into the world? It's always the right time to bring new life into the world. And that's a message that's really bonded to the gospel. And so I think the real long-term answer to your question is, the best thing the church does is preach the gospel about life, and secondly, good examples. And I think you're only going to encounter those good examples when you go to church. One of the most enjoyable things I do, I think the right word is fun, is once a year we have a marriage anniversaries mass at the cathedral, and the cathedral's packed. And you've got people celebrating their 5th anniversary, 10th, 25th, 30th, 40th, 45th, 50th. We usually get a few in their 60 years of marriage, or 65 even. And you see these couples, and I'm blessing them, and the love and the affection in their eyes. And none of them found it to be easy, but they depended upon their faith, their commitment, the teachings of the church. And they're the best examples. They're the best prophetic witnesses for their families and for their communities.
I agree.
I'm glad you agree with me. It's important that we agree.
Of course. Yeah, well, in my own, my role models, my parents, they're a great example for me. Although sometimes they may have their struggles, I can see it. And I really appreciate all those answers that you have given me, because as a child, and seeing my parents go through those struggles sometimes, but still holding on to their faith and just leaning on Him for more strength to continue.
And the key is not just to remember the struggles they went through, but to remember the reconciliations and how it strengthened the union.
Yes.
For you and your entire family.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Parents like that are a treasure.
Yeah, and having that unity, and it's only two of us, but having that unity as the marriage that they have continues our unity as the four of us to continue on with life. So I think that's very inspirational, and I appreciate you.
Now, are we also talking about vocations? Did I hear that?
Yes.
So we know that there are different vocations that the church and God calls us to, such as the religious life and priesthood. And it's a shame that they're often overlooked or looked down upon in some cases by youth. And it's a shame because they are really beautiful vocations, they're beautiful lifestyles. So the reason they're overlooked might be because they're not talked about enough, or they're not talked about enough, or they're not, yeah. So why do you think this is the case? And what can the church say to youth to encourage them to embrace and explore these vocations?
We've had some young women from our diocese go into religious life, and we've certainly have had seminarians and continue to. We, a year ago, ordained 5 new priests. It was one of the most joyful days of my life. The truth is, yesterday, I had a funeral for a nun in Sonoita at Santa Rita Trappist Monastery. And she was, I believe, well into her 80s, and she'd actually been in an active order for about 20, 25 years. And she was sent when she was an active sister to Bolivia. And she would regale us with stories. I loved her. Sister Margarita Walsh. And she would regale us with stories of how in Bolivia, she was a nurse, did all kinds of nursing, medical stuff, but oftentimes places where she would need to go, the only way to get there, she would say, the only conveyance was a donkey. And she learned Spanish. And then after years of that and loving it, she felt called to that monastic contemplative life. And for almost 30 years was a very joyful. And she was the one that would answer the phone, and people would call the monastery. And they would say, is Sister Marg available? Because in just a few minutes' time, chatting with someone on the phone, because they're a contemplative monastery, she was such a resource for people. And actually a movie has been produced on our sisters from Sonoita, Santa Rita Abbey. It'll be out in the fall. And I've seen a preview of it. It's really marvelous about their life. So I think the church at its best is once again setting some great examples before us of people who live lives of really profound and joyful meaning. I also find, I've spoken before about people in law school doing forms of law, wanting to go into areas of law that don't make a lot of money. But I sometimes look at young men that want to be priests today, or at least try the seminary, do some discernment. And I always think in my day, I applied in 1978. Was anyone here born in, no, anyway. So I applied in 78. In 1978, if I would have said to a non-Catholic, I'm thinking of being a priest, high school senior, a non-Catholic would have said, well, that's a noble thing to do. Vocations were talked about in parishes. Vocations were talked about in homes. Vocations were talked about in Catholic schools. But when I look at 50 years later, we don't talk about vocations in Catholic schools very much. We're doing it again. We don't talk about Catholic vocations in Catholic homes. We don't talk about it in Catholic parishes very much. And if a young man today says to a non-Catholic, I'm thinking of being a priest, they probably would want to push you into the nearest psychiatrist's office. And so one of the reasons why young men and women who are looking at vocations today, to me, I call them, not trying to be corny, but my heroes, because they're fighting that uphill battle that the church kind of felt in the first 3-4 centuries. I mean, where it was ridiculed and debased. For me, I got to admit, the culture was more sympathetic and more encouraging. But some of these young men and women who go off to religious life and priesthood, the zeal they have, the commitment to give of their lives, it's really incredible, and it kind of renews my faith and renews my own vocation.
What would you say to somebody who is thinking about discerning the religious life, what would their first steps be?
Talk to someone. I always say, my pastor when I was in high school was a very, 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 very shy introvert. And I always wanted to talk to him about priesthood. And he knew I was interested, and I served Mass every Sunday from like second grade until I graduated from high school, but I'm still at it. But you need someone to talk to. I think there's a lot of fears. I think the first fear is, I'm going to get slotted as that future nun or future priest, or that they're going to try to twist my arm. No. But discerning is all about talking, and talking with the right person. And so here in our diocese, we have a really good vocations office. They can connect a woman who's considering vocations to religious life with all kinds of different women. And if it's a young man discerning priesthood, we can talk to him about diocesan priesthood. We have great priests to talk about that with. If he's interested in religious life, we have Carmelites, we have Franciscans, we have Salvatorans. We've got all kinds of congregations, Dominicans. And so we're really happy to connect people. I think sometimes men think, I'm going to steal them all for the diocese. I want diocese. I need Franciscans, I need Carmelites, Salvatorans. We need them all. And so I would like to encourage all those vocations. But again, the short answer is talk to someone, and talk to the right person. Good? Well, you're sure welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate your interest and your zeal.
Thank you, Bishop.
You bet.